You will have an opportunity on pages 18 and 19 of the percent book to estimate with percents. And this is a very useful skill, a real-life skill. Estimating is helpful for being able to get an approximate answer when we don't really have to know an exact answer. And sometimes be able to make a calculation in our using mental math in our head without even having to use paper and pencil. A very useful skill. The instructional material right here, I am going to skip over and present it to you in my own way. So I'd like to just jump down to this little section right here and read through it. I like this very much. This says, working with compatible numbers. A good way to estimate is to round to everyday percents and compatible numbers whenever possible. Now, everyday percents would be the percents that are equivalent to our common fractions. Everyday percents would be 50%, 25%, 20%, and so on. And then what is meant by compatible numbers is this. Compatible numbers are numbers that you can easily multiply or divide. So sometimes when you are making an estimation, you will round or you will just actually change a number in the problem to a number that's close by because that number is easy to multiply or divide with another number. We want the multiplication and division to be easy so that we can do that multiplication or division mentally in our heads or easily with paper and pencil. And so let me go back to, I want to talk through this information up here, but I'm going to use my own notes for that. All right, so I'd like to talk through, make a point here. Now, what I want to get at with this material is the idea of being able to take 50% of a number, 33% of a number, 66 2/3 of a number, 25% of a number, and so on, using mental math, not having to use paper and pencil. So we can rewrite 50% of a number, and I'm just using an empty box to represent whatever this number would be. Could just be any number for the moment. So if I rewrite this, 50% is of course equivalent to the fraction 1/2, and of in this little phrase means multiply. So I have my multiplication sign, and here's my number represented by the empty box, written over 1, because when we do fraction multiplication, all of the elements in our multiplication problem have to be in fraction form. And so on the next line, I've rewritten 33 1/3% of some number as 1/3 times the number. And again, 66 2/3% of some number is the same thing as 2/3 times that number. And you can see I've done the same thing for 25%. There's the 1/4. The 20%, there's the 1/5. 10%, there's 1/10. And 1%, there's 1/100. So we have these rewritten multiplication, fraction, computations, but the fractions in all of these cases are very simple fractions. All of them, except for the 2/3, have a 1 in the numerator. And what that means is that when you multiply by 1/2, you're going to end up dividing with that 2 because the 2 is in the denominator. So multiplying by 1/2 means that you're going to divide by 2. Similarly, multiplying by 1/3 means that you're going to end up dividing with that 3 because it's in the denominator. So I can sort of rewrite 1/3 times as divide by 3. I'll come back to the 2/3 last. When you multiply times 1/4, what you're really doing simply is just dividing by 4. When you multiply by 1/5, you're dividing by 5. When you multiply by 1/10, that's the same thing as dividing by 10, which is also the same thing as moving the decimal place over one place to the left. When you multiply by 1/100th, that's the same thing as dividing by 100, which is also the same thing as moving the decimal place over 2 places to the left. Okay, so, oh yes, back to multiplying by 2/3. That would be the same thing as dividing by 3, because that 3 is in the denominator, and then multiplying by 2, because that 2 is in the numerator. All right, so when you take 50% of a number, all you need to do is divide that number by 2. When you are taking 33% of a number, all you really need to do is divide that number by 3. When you take 20% of a number, all you need to really do is just divide that number by 5. Now, if you can divide by 2, divide by 3, divide by 3, and so on, and you can do that. Just a moment, I've got to turn my phone off. When you can do that mentally, I mean with a compatible number, in other words, a number that will divide easily by 2, or a number that will divide easily by 3, and so forth, then the math is simple, it's easy, and you can possibly just do it in your head without paper and pencil. Okay, so I want to just go through the examples on page 18, and then you're going to have some problem sets on page 19. All right, so example 1, we have the problem, what is 9.5% of 123? Okay, so if we are going to estimate an answer, then 9.5% is very close to 10%. So we're going to change 9.5% to 10%, and 123 is very close to 120. So we're going to change 123 to 120, and then to find 10% of 120, all we have to do is divide by 10, or move the decimal point one place over to the left, and we get 12. And that's much easier to do than to calculate 9.5% of 123. If you don't have to know an exact answer, just round and estimate. Example number 2. What is 26% of 392? So in this example, the 26% has been changed to 25%, and the 392 has been changed to 400. And to find 25% of a number, remember, all we have to 25% of a number is the same thing as dividing that number by 4. So our 400 divided by 4, we can easily get the answer 100. All right, one more example. 7 is what percent of 29? All right, so this is a what percent problem. We've got to identify the part in the whole, the of number, that's the whole, the is number, that's the part. So we have to set up our fraction with the part on the top, the whole on the bottom. However, if the 7 and the 29 are what we would say would be not compatible, because 7 7 is not divisible into 29 evenly, but 29 is really close to the number 28, and 7 and 28 are very compatible because 7 divides unevenly into 28. Therefore, if we change 29 to 28, then we can easily reduce 7 over 28. That reduces to 1 over 4, and 1 over 4 is one of our common fractions, 25%. Okay, so you're being asked to try and get answers to the problems on page 19 by using rounding and changing numbers to compatible numbers. Remember, you really want to see if you can round to or change to these common percents because they are equivalent to these common fractions, and then change the numbers that are going to be that you're going to be working with so that you can use compatible numbers that can be multiplied and divided easily with each other. Now notice on page 19 that I have crossed out number 2, don't do it. I've crossed out number 8, and I've crossed out number 10. Now the reason that I've done that is that those 3 problems are find the whole problems, and you have not learned that skill yet, so you can just skip those problems.